The S4 is in a little bit of a holding pattern right now. Big turbos and big brakes are on the horizon for this car, and that horizon is quickly approaching. Plus, a solid amount of the parts needed to do both of those are already on their way. The only issue is they're not going to be here for a little bit. So in other words, what we can do right now is everything we possibly can think of in order to get this car ready for those swaps. The more preparation we do now, the better they're going to be. What I'd like to focus on first today has to do with the Rotiforms we tossed on last week. They look absolutely stunning, but the poke is atrocious. In other words, let's fix that first. But obviously we can't do that here. So first things first, we need to take the car home. Then we'll be able to take the car apart and start getting all the measurements we need to make these wheels fit flush. And I guess we also better set some time aside to figure out why the door stopped working. The to-do list for this car just seems to never end. The initial plan for today was to focus entirely on fitment. However, having a door that won't latch or lock is definitely a big issue and a high priority one at that. I would prefer not to have the car stolen after all, so we're gonna have to work that in too. And thankfully, parts are already here for both issues. The red herring of this weekend was that this box contained not only parts for the S4, but the next mods for the E30. And they're fun ones too. So it's not exactly easy to not try and install both of them at the same time. It's an S4 week though, so I'll try to manage. We do need to separate the parts though. As tempting as it is to work on both cars at the same time, I think we should be smart this weekend. Each car gets its own time to shine, and I want to absolutely make sure we get the S4 fixed up right. First things first, let's start with the door. It has been getting progressively worse and worse and worse, and it's about time we fix it. The only issue is I don't really know what's wrong. I kind of know what's back there, but a lot of this is going to be learning as we go. So let's dive in. So the issue is this. The door latches, locks, and shuts inconsistently. Sometimes it works absolutely great, and other times I can't physically shut the door, all of which are signs of a faulty door latch, which is a part that is housed in the door itself. In other words, yet again we get to remove the door cards, and also the window itself. And we've done this a number of times now, so it isn't anything new. What is new to me, however, is the latch mechanism behind the door internals. So once we get these out of the way, we're going to take a little bit of time and learn what's actually back there. Honestly, with everything out of the way, it looks like this is going to be a simple thing to swap. And expanding upon that, it looks like a relatively simple system overall. There are two cables that come out of the door latch itself. One that goes to the little door lock knob thing that goes up and down, and the other that goes to the interior door handle. There's also a little metal rod that connects to the outside door handle. How is the latch actually powered though? Well, believe it or not, it is controlled with air. Vacuum to be specific. The orange hose on top is actually a vacuum line, and the pressure in that line opens or closes the latch. And that vacuum is likely software controlled in the front of the car, which is how the electric locks work. Kind of an interesting design to be honest, but it's pretty cool. And this whole latch mechanism is very easy to remove. 2 Torx bolts on the exterior of the door and the whole thing can be slid out of place. The only thing really holding it in place now is the rod connecting to the exterior door handle, which we can pop out of place. And after that, we can carefully remove the air line, trying our hardest not to break it. I can't imagine a leak in these would be fun to fix. With the mechanism out, however, we can start inspecting it for anything that looks wrong. I could be wrong, but I have a hunch that this latch mechanism is hydraulically operated. Remember, there's no electricity running to this thing. That vacuum line likely pulls and pushes a hydraulic piston which shuts the latch. And my sneaking suspicion is that the reason it's been inconsistent is because that fluid is leaking. You can see it everywhere. And I'm sure you absolutely could rebuild it. However, in my case, I found a used one for about $20 shipped, so swapping it is 100% the way I'm gonna go. And just to confirm that this mystery fluid isn't a feature, if we look at the working used one, we can see that it is nowhere to be found. So likely our idea of how this latch works isn't too far off, and we're good to swap everything over. The hardest part of this entire swap was reconnecting the exterior door latch piece. There's a little plastic piece that connects both of the metal pieces, and it's a tolerance fit. So what helps is to put that in first and then work the metal in. But other than that, this entire process is very smooth sailing. And after a little bit of effort, we were successful. The door now shuts without 50 minutes of effort, which is a fantastic improvement. So now I'd say it's time we talk about the S4 wheels and start fixing that poke. I am absolutely in love with how these turned out. These silver TMBs look way better on the car than I had ever thought they would, but the fitment, not the best. There's a pretty significant amount of poke right now, but I was expecting that. After all, the car is running spacers that were sized for the old wheels, and these new ones are a completely different offset. I bought these wheels in the right spec so that they should be flush without any sort of spacers. The only issue is they might not clear the front stock B5S4 calipers. They're inherently huge. Now this won't be a huge issue because I have brakes on the way for the car, and that caliper design is going to be a lot more compact and effective than what's on the car now. The issue is we need to come up with an interim fix until then. The amount of poke and the way these wheels sit currently with the huge spacers means that the rear is currently rubbing quite bad, and I don't really want to ruin brand new tires. Best case, they clear the calipers and we're absolutely good. Worst case, we have to run some spacers in the meantime. Right now, it's all a question of clearance. Some ET35 wheels will clear the calipers without spacers, and others won't. It's entirely got to do with the spoke design of the wheels, so we really won't know until we test it with these. And this is really only an issue because the stock S4 calipers are very, very wide. Hence why the spacers that are on the car currently are also huge. These are the only way that the old wheels were able to clear the calipers, but my current hope is we no longer need these. Just loosely holding this measuring tape here here, you can get an idea of just how aggressively wide these calipers are. It's an old school design and it is quite bulky, and the brakes I have on the way to replace these are going to be a lot more efficient, so they should definitely clear. But that doesn't exactly help me right now. I want to run these wheels with the current brakes and less poke. So that is where this whole story starts. Why I want to test these without spacers in the first place. So I'd say it's time we remove these massive spacers. Now it is the moment of truth. Will these wheels clear the calipers? I mounted the wheel and I checked. The wheel rotates without any grinding, which means they technically do clear. They aren't touching the caliper, but they are concerningly close. I'm talking close to the point where they probably would not work. It's hard to do justice to just how close they are without using something super small. A razor blade does not fit between the caliper and the wheel. The tip barely fits between these. I was going to measure it with the tape measure, but the little metal hook on the end of it would not fit here, so it's not going to work like this.
And thankfully, I had a hunch this was going to happen. So I actually have spacers ready to go on the car now.
The lame thing about having to run spacers now is that we're going to have some sort of poke. These wheels fit absolutely flush without any spacers, but that is not nearly enough clearance for me to feel secure driving the car. So the lesser of two evils is having a little bit of poke until brakes show up, and it will still be an improvement. So that's what we're going with. I got some 10mm spacers with extended lugs from ECS. These spacers are bigger than what we need, but a lot smaller than what was on the car. So they are definitely going to make a difference. How much of a difference, however, we're just gonna have to get them all on and see. Another thing that's worth touching on is the rear of the S4. You might wonder why I don't just run no spacers in the rear to achieve the desired fitment back there. And there's a very simple answer to that. My personal preference is that all-wheel drive cars should have exactly square setups. That includes wheels, tires, and spacers. So the rear gets these 10mm spacers for the time being as well. One thing I haven't touched on too much with these old spacers and these new wheels was just how much the rear was rubbing. The old spacers stuck the rear wheels out past the edge of the wheel well, so every time we went over any bump whatsoever, we were rubbing and hurting our new tires. These should hopefully correct that though.
Now in hindsight, we could have gotten away with something like 3mm spacers, but I went with 10 because I figured that would be a lot easier to reuse in the future on future projects than something as small as 3. This, however, will be enough of a difference to A, make it look a lot better, and B, stop it rubbing in the rear, which is the main benefit.
The real question is, however, does it look any better? And the answer to that question is yes. There is still absolutely poke, but it is a lot closer to being flush than it was. In fact, the edge of the tires lines up perfectly with the edge of the wheel well now. So really, it's just the lip of the wheel that pokes a bit still. But once the new brakes are on the car, this will definitely get corrected. For the time being, however, this is much better looking fitment. And it's also a lot safer for the tires since it's no longer rubbing, meaning we can start taking measurements of where the car's currently at and enjoying the final days of this car being on KO3s. And as an added bonus, I can once again trust that the door will shut. So this car is in a fantastic spot, and it's only going to get better. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing for more. That's the best way you can help support me and my content. Either way, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day.